You are listening to People, Place, and the Ocean. This series is inspired by the Gros Morne community-led Marine Atlas, but a book can only go so far, so we're bringing it to life through the voices of the people that inspired the creation of this atlas, and who helped tell the story of Gros Morne. In this episode, we will begin to unpack elements of the atlas that relate to the ways of life in the remote parts of not only Gros Morne, but the whole northern peninsula of Newfoundland. We're also going to discuss how these ways of life are dependent on sustainability. And so we will speak with two Indigenous women today who will share the importance of Indigenous-led stewardship. Today I'm here in Port Saunders continuing our discussion with Chief Mildred Lavers, and we are also joined by Michelle Caines, who is also with the Northern Peninsula Band and is the Vice President of the Newfoundland Indigenous Peoples Alliance. And Michelle, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you got into this role?
Okay, so I was born and raised in Deer Lake, but my parents were born and raised in Portland Creek. So we spent most of our childhood actually in Portland Creek for holidays, vacations, you name it. So I got to partake in a lot of the cultural activities like living off the land. Myself and Dad, we had a trap line. My dad was a fisherman before he left to go to Deer Lake. So when we would come down here, of course, we would be engaged in all the activities. I guess he was more or less helping his parents out when he came down. So it was getting the wood, doing the vegetables, trap lines, helping salmon fishing for me. I didn't do a lot of out in the boat, but we certainly did come down here to the lake to get our seasonal fish because, again, that's what we lived off was moose, fish, or grown vegetables. I got involved with the Northern Peninsula Band maybe 8-9 years ago. I moved back to Portland Creek after I had grown, and I still wanted to be here. Just enjoyed living off the land and learning cultural ways. And so Mildred reached out to me when she started the Northern Peninsula Band, and I got involved in that. And it's very important for us to find ways that we can keep our land, our oceans sustainable for our people.
Amazing. And I wanted to applaud you both for the work that you're doing because I know that a lot has taken place in recent years for the Northern Peninsula Band. Some of the things you guys had to do growing up to sustain your families. And some of these stories, I think, are quite familiar with the people down in Gros Morne. Mm-hmm. The ocean is fluid and connects communities all along the coast. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
The ocean, yes, very important. When I was in school, a boat would come through in the spring of the years. It was called the Easter Seals or something. To be brought to that boat, we had to have a TB test. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was you had scratches on your arm, and if a rash showed up or something, you had to be tuberculosis. You had to be shipped off to the sanatorium for X number of months. Wow. And lots of people on this coast had TB because it was very easy to pick up from one another. When Nurse Bennett came, that was a very big challenge that she faced. The tuberculosis was rampant, people were dying from it, and people didn't want to listen. Like mothers would sometimes chew up food and then put it in the baby's mouth, and people just catching it from each other. So if they were to be shipped off to sanatorium or somewhere, it was usually by coastal boat also.
Oh. Yeah. So these coastal boats were incredibly important for the people of this area to get access to medical attention, to travel, to gather resources and supplies. I mean, yeah, that's a really important aspect of the life out here. So maybe can you speak a little bit more about what might happen if there's any issue with the coastal boat?
Well, the coastal boats would come through. First one would probably come whenever the ice broke up in the spring, which may be May, it may even be June. It may have happened in April. But these coastal boats supplied the groceries, the supplies for people on the coast. So there was a store in most communities, but smaller communities didn't have a grocery store. So you had to travel, like I know that happened in Portland Creek, people would have to travel to Dangus Harbour to pick up the groceries. Sometimes 4 or 5 women would get together, travel on foot with a sack, like to pick up groceries and bring that back, walk back with that. It was 5 miles each way. And then later, when the road came through, it was by vehicle. But before that, the coastal boats supplied any groceries that came on the coast. So the merchant in the communities would order up X number of barrels of flour, sugar, staples like that, butter, molasses. Our family would purchase a barrel of molasses. So
wow.
slower than cold molasses, y'all know what that means. And you would dry off a gallon at a time. We had to keep the barrel in our shed on the side and put the supports in under it so that it didn't roll. Then you had to maneuver that. If you were sent out to the shed to get a gallon of molasses, you had to maneuver that carefully, get those supports out so that the barrel would tip just the right amount, and get them back in so that it didn't go too far, then drain the molasses. That's a story in itself. But the stores, those merchants, the community was at the mercy of the merchants, really. If they didn't order enough supplies or something and ran out, and the merchants kind of like controlled how much you can have. Like families who went to the stores was charged in, and then you would do your tab at the end of the year or whatever. The merchant system they called it. So if they didn't buy in enough of supplies, the whole community could die of starvation.
Wow.
Right? And I've heard of communities where they were running out of flour like in the month of March, just the hungry month of March, running out of supplies and, scraping the bottom of the barrel to get enough flour to try to make one more lot of bread or whatever, right? So it was really starvation. And there were lots of people that did die from starvation on the coast there.
I guess that speaks to the importance of being able to preserve traditional activities and traditional ways of living, especially in a place where it can be so hard to get access to resources from outside. Those traditional ways of life are so valuable in these conditions.
I don't know if you call it traditions or it was an entrenched way of life. You had to do it, I guess, for survival. Michelle mentioned the vegetable gardens. That was a chore every spring. The whole family basically had to join in. Like we had big plots of land. We even, like some near our house, some where we would travel further away, wherever you could find good land. And the whole family had to join in and go there and help do the land, plant the vegetables and stuff. Then you had to keep them weeded. And you had to, because your existence was dependent upon that. I didn't realize so much at the time. I guess what my parents did when they were trying to drive me in the garden. You had to weed it, look after it, whatever. And then in the fall, when it was taken up, we had cellars, underground cellars. So everything was placed there. So Saturdays or so, you would be sent to the cellar to get turnips, carrots, cabbage, potatoes, whatever. So I was always a bit nervous about that because there might be spiders because it was a dark underground.
Oh, no.
And sometimes people had to, like jams. You would pick lots of berries, bake apples, berries, marsh berries, and raspberries, and whatever. All these had to be preserved. Most of them could be frozen. The raspberries had to be preserved in bottles. So that was lined off in the cellar too. So the bottles of raspberries and bottles of beets and whatever. It was like you go shopping. But you were very limited in your choices. Every evening after school, we had to go berry picking in the marsh. I remember one year my sister and I, we filled a barrel, which is 45 gallons, same as a 45-gallon drum of oil.
Oh, wow.
It was a barrel of apples that we had empty. So we filled this barrel full of marsh berries. The barrel plus a milk case full. A milk case which would hold like 48 cans of milk. And so that was our berries for the winter.
Oh my gosh.
And mother would make jams and pies out of that. Traditions, that was part of it. And wood, you had to be constantly getting wood. I used to go in and help father with I guess you never got to buy, but I had to do a lot of chores. I had to go in and help father lots of times with getting the wood and cutting it down, putting it on the sleigh and bringing it out and walk all the ways in the woods after school sometimes, right? And bringing water. We had to go to a spring that was not too far from our house.
Dry in the cottage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was always fun.
Yep.
There you go. Salt and cod.
So, yeah, and the drying process, because, you had to make sure it was out long enough to get dry. So if you had a day of rain, you had to go pack it all in, and then you'd have to get out and wait for sunshine, and then you'd have to drag it all out and lay it all out again.
Yep. and try to keep shooing the flies off
The
it.
flies, yeah.
Of course.
The flies over there might be and so try to watch that didn't spoil, because that was your next winter's food too.
Of course.
Oh, that was your
Right.
food for the winter.
For the winter, isn't that right?
Yeah.
That's right. Now, how do you see some of these ways of life, traditions get passed down to the younger generations?
A lot of it, I think, is lost today. Very few people now put in vegetable gardens. If they do, it seems to be only the adults. It was a family thing then. You had no choice. The whole family went. You went for the day. Food was packed. The pot was there. You lit the fire. I remember at one point when I went to the garden with Father and them for the whole day, they brought up a load of lobsters to cook. They did the open fire in a big pot, and I was highly insulted. I was not eating lobsters. I wouldn't have them that. So,
No?
So they took a can of beans for me, which I thought was a wonderful treat. Wonderful treat. I was having a can of beans. They were eating the whole lobsters. But you went for the whole day, and you worked, and not just one day. Like you did that for a full week till the gardens were all done. Mm-hmm. So they were all put in, and you were down in the trenches, and you were digging, and you worked very, very hard. And then, the making the hay too.
Making the hay.
Making the hay. Most people then had a really huge, big piece of land because they had horses and cows and whatever, and they needed that big piece of land for the animals to graze and support themselves, and sheep and so on. So all these animals needed hay for the winter. So grandfather and father, and I'm sure the sons-in-laws too, which would have been her father, get out mowing the hay, big scythe. Have you ever seen a scythe?
No.
It's a real thing with a crooked handle, and it's a big long blade. About that, we got one home that belonged to Mac's father or somebody.
Oh,
We've just kept it right. And so you get out in and you cut like that. There was no lawnmower or whatever. And so the grass would be yay high. And as kids, we weren't allowed near that huge field. Don't, because you're knocking down the hay. You're knocking down the grass.
Right.
And it had to be mowed and cut, right? So don't go near it. We didn't always listen, but anyway. Grandfather would mow the hay, or father, people help him, whatever, because it was a huge, huge field. And then that had to be spread again and again with pitchforks. And again, it had to be dried, almost like the codfish. It had to be dried and preserved. And if a rain came, you had to hurry up and go pick up the hay. And, it would be all hands on board. The pitchforks would get the hay in a pook, we used to call it, a haystack, and then put something over, or at least like smooth it down so that the rain can't get down through all of it. And so then if that rained for an hour and then the sun came out, okay, get out, spread it again.
Get out and
Spread it all out again. And so you had to do that till the hay was dry. If not, then it had to be loaded on the horse and put in the loft of the barn. So some of us kids would get up in the loft, and so they would swing up somehow like on a rope and that, right? So we were responsible for catching that and putting the hay back, pushing it way, way back, stuffing it back. That was for the winter. So that when the horses and the sheep and whatever was in the barn in the winter, somebody would go upstairs and throw down so much hay, and then you put that out to the animals. If you put it in when it was damp or something, the hay got moldy and there was no hay for the winter. That was a disaster. The animals would starve, and then you didn't have sheep to kill, or cows to kill, or cows to milk. So milking the cows, another chore.
Yeah. You really got to think throughout your whole year how you can prepare for winters.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask a little bit more of a fun question. Do you have any memories that you'd want to share about being on the water, growing up here, and maybe some ways that you've had to navigate the coastline, the shoreline, the ocean?
Yeah, well, the one about being born. Yeah, the one about I used to lobster fish with my father for a little while, namely because he couldn't get anybody else or whatever the case was to lobster fish. But so I went out and boat with him sometimes. I don't think it was a great help, but I suppose to keep the boat lined up with a landmark, which was Portland Head, and I didn't do such a great job. But anyway, we were going out in these open boats, lobster fishing, and all lobsters traps in over the edge of the boat, so on and so on. No life jackets or anything like that. No thought of like, God, you're out in the middle of the Atlantic and something can happen,
What about you, Michelle?
It wasn't for the ocean for me as much.
Okay, coastal area.
The coastal area, I don't know that I got any funny ones, though. Because it was all work back then.
Right.
You had to be involved.
Yep.
And
That's
like
true.
Mildred was saying, it was a family thing.
Yeah.
So when it came to the fur, the trapping and stuff, well, that was done to provide money for the family, right? So I did not have a lot of fun at that.
No.
I used to cry when we come up on the beavers and the rapids and stuff, and I say, "Oh, Dad, let it go," and he'd say, "Honey, we're not letting that one go, right?
No.
Right? But like, we only took what we needed because I always had to do the other side of it too. I had to skin it and I had to preserve the furs, and then it was sent off, and that was our money, right? So yeah, so I guess it was funny, but not a ha-ha funny, like, as a kid, right? But,
yeah, definitely.
But it was all responsibilities. We had to do it to survive.
So now my next question is, when we're thinking about future generations, what are some ways that we can steward our ocean for the future? And what are some ways that you think are important in terms of managing ocean resources for the future generations?
Steward the oceans, right? I think too many of our decisions are made by higher ups, provincial governments and federal governments, who never step foot in our coastal areas and don't know really what they're talking about. Decisions are made that's detrimental to our areas, and a lot of our fishermen can attest to that, I'm sure. Like, we had a cod moratorium on in 1992. Why? Because everything was just free for all. Go take whatever's there, And I think we're still suffering some of the consequences of that. The cod fishery has not really been back up full swing since that particular time. Take for lobsters too, like it was a free-for-all for lobsters basically too. Like when I was growing up, you kept the female lobsters, you kept whatever came in over the side of the boat. Even if it was small ones, you weren't allowed to keep them, but they were kept by the fishermen. You see a fisherman walking up the beach with his oil skins under his arm, you knew what was in there, right? It wasn't just oil skins up there. But yeah, I think the best stewards of the land, of the oceans and the coast, are the peoples who are using it. They're the frontline people. They know. And I think some of them are doing things in the right way. Speaking with somebody just last evening, talking about the herring fishery, and oh my gosh, they got so many million pounds of herring that their quota is. And I was like, what? And they said that yes, and so I thought, oh my God, here we go now with the herring fishery. But anyway, through conservation methods, they harvest some of the herring before they spawn, and then they leave it alone for a while. They move back deep, so they move around to correspond with the life cycle or the spawning season of the herring. Which I thought, wow, that's good.
That's an incredible example, yeah, and thinking about these adaptive approaches.
Yep. I think one thing that we can all speak about around here is the foreign draggers, the foreign boats, and not too foreign either. Like we have Quebec boats that can come here in 200-mile limit or so, and I'm not real versed in things of the ocean that our fishermen have to observe. But a lot of them can come right in, basically touching the shoreline. Quebec people can come here and do what they like. That's government decisions. Yeah.
Whereas it should be coming from the people that are actually here.
Yes, there should be more frontline people coming here and going out on the boats and seeing, let's see really what the shrimp stocks are like. Let's really see what the cod stocks are like. Now make one flying, fleeting visit. However, come particular times. There's different seasons for different things, right? So come and see, really go out in the boats and see.
That's a really good point you make too about how important monitoring is over longer periods of time. Not just making that one visit and thinking you can get a full assessment that way. It takes a lot more time.
And that's the oceans. We do have wardens or guardians or whatever you call it, of our rivers and that sometimes.
Fisheries
Again,
guardians.
that's hardly not enough. They can't be in all places at all times. Like a river guardian may have 5 or 6 rivers to look after. So, when he leaves this area, guess what? Is that going to happen there? Right? And if you're around the river, sometimes you can see that. Salmon are supposed to be tagged when they're caught, but you might be sitting there fishing sometimes. You see this fisherman going up like the salmon's not tagged, right?
What are some opportunities that you can think of that might help to safeguard some of our ocean and coastal resources in places like this?
Guardians, more guardians. And we can get land guardians and such in that too. And I think that would be looking after our coastal areas too, right? Right now we've got one applied for. Hopefully we get it. Then we can hire a person or more persons, and we can start looking after the land areas, include the coastal areas.
Yeah. And perhaps maybe what's something that we could do or something you could think of that would help to manage our ocean resources also in a way that would protect Indigenous rights and also preserve Indigenous culture?
Again, Indigenous culture really says, like, take only what you need, right? Like in other provinces, they do have Indigenous rights, and we're pushing for that, where you can fish, you're allowed to get X number of codfish or salmon or whatever the case might be, or lobsters or whatever. We would like to have that right here too, and maybe then there wouldn't be abuse of it, you know. Indigenous peoples, I think, know the right way, like that things should be done with our oceans or our rivers or our coasts, you know.
And respect it.
And respect it, isn't that right? Like right now we have some talks, or last year I think, of a coastal trail coming the whole northern peninsula. So they were supposed to start in Parsons Pond, and a section was supposed to be done from Parsons Pond to Daniels Harbour. That never got off the ground, I don't think. Never started. Well, again, that was probably not really done in the right way. They say that there's going to be, like, this trail's going to go all the way down Northern Peninsula and hook up with the Iceberg Trail or something, or whatever it is, near St. Anthony area, right? So that you can basically travel the whole Northern Peninsula on this trail. We'd probably like just walking, hiking to a trail, or pedal bikes, bicycles, I think, I'm not sure. Anyway, again, nobody seems to have thought about that. You should go into the communities and talk to the people who live on the coastline. Some of these people putting these trails through, some of these plans, this coastal trail probably cuts right through some people's front yard, right? And nobody went and spoke to them people and said, okay, let's see how we can work around this. Let's see what we can work out here.
Yeah, figure out a way that works for everyone. And
right.
Yeah.
Like we have my husband's grandfather's land at the bottom of Port Saunders. There's a beautiful piece of land. It's right on the beach. If that coastal trail goes along there, which, well, at some point I'm sure, it was going to be passing all on your doorstep with dogs and whatever. And there's animals around there. There's caribou around there. There's geese around there, and so on. He's going to be protecting them. That, you know. So.
That's a really good example, and right here in your own backyard as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just the importance of having to make sure that you go into the communities and talk.
Consultation.
Yeah, like meaningful, like really working with the people that live here and rely on this landscape. So good example there. I guess one final question for each of you. Basically an opportunity for you to think of any other last things you want to share.
I will say life was hard. It was difficult. Our houses had no indoor plumbing, no source of central heating or anything either. We had a huge big old cast iron stove in the kitchen. That was the heat. It was very, very cold. I've seen our house so cold when I got up in the morning that the water in the kettle and the stove was froze.
Imagine that.
Right? Very, 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 very cold. And there was still a feather mattress on your bed, which came from Father would get ducks and whatever, and they were picked in our kitchen. We had to help pick those too. So there was feathers everywhere. These were made into feather mattresses and feather pillows and such. And then, of course, you ate the ducks for the food, because after they were picked, there was still some down left on the body. So a father had this big piece of iron that he would put in the stove till it got red hot, and then he would just go all over to take all that off the ducks, and what smell. Right? But that was where our feather pillow stuff came from. So it was survival like that. But still, so when you got in, there was umpteen quilts on top of you, but when you had to get out of the bed, it was cold. Right? In the winter. It was very cold. I think the most wonderful thing that I saw was when I was in grade 10, I guess. We got electricity. We got a generator. Father and the neighbor next door bought a generator between them, and we finally had electricity. We only had like a naked bulb, one in the kitchen, one in the dining room, living room, whatever, and it was lights out at 10 no matter what you were doing. Lights out at 10, because that's when the gentleman decided that we're going to shut down the power for the night.
Of course.
But so I said, when we got electricity, first thing, Mother, you're getting for Mother's Day is an electric kettle. Right? And then next thing was an electric toaster. So that breakfast wasn't so hard to get in the mornings.
Yeah, and not having to deal with a frozen kettle.
That's how cool it got there at one point. Right?
Oh my gosh.
It was very, very chilly, and it was, survival. You really had to be doing a lot of things. And like when I was growing up too, Father was gone a lot because he worked away. They would be gone, him and his grandfather, and Michelle, your father, sometimes too, getting logs in the woods. They had a big sawmill in Portland Creek, so that was a source of income. They would get logs all went there, bring them out, pile them up, and then saw the lumber. And that was another chore. You had to go over and keep shoveling the sawdust away from the sawmill and piling up the slabs. But that's provided some money to sell that lumber. And again, that lumber was loaded aboard the coastal boat before transportation came, so the lumber had to be carried out aboard a small boat, a scow. They used to have what they call a scow, which was a heavy-duty boat, a wide thing. It was almost like an ark, a sheet like that, whatever. So they could load a big load of lumber aboard that, and they would bring that out to the coastal boat and get it aboard, and then that would be shipped to stand down later life. Bowater's probably earlier, and at some point way down the road they might receive some money for it. Or the merchant thing, you go and take up your tab with the merchant, right? So you work at that, and then, we piles of logs there, and then when they were sawmill, then next, that got converted to a pile of lumber. And they sawed like the lobster lats for making the lobster traps and such and that. But it was like constant work for survival.
Yeah, surviving up this way is definitely not for the faint of heart.
No.
different way of life.
Yeah, it was difficult. I say we had the strongest ancestors because they came on this coast and they persevered and stayed here, and because of them we're here.
Okay, and you guys are a tough bunch.
Oh boy.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you both for being here today and for taking part in this really important project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be sure not to miss the next episode and subscribe to the podcast now and follow along as we tell the story of Gross Mourne, the people, place, and the ocean.